All right, Jordan, quickly, we got to talk about the transfer portal. It has already hit the Clemson Tigers, and it's not even open yet. We just finished signing day literally today. We'll get into that in just a minute. But before we get into signing day, we got to talk the transfer portal. Clemson's already got at least one reportedly that is going to move on from the Tigers and enter his name into the transfer portal, and that is none other than Troy Stellato. Everybody knows Troy Stellato. He's been around Clemson for, I think, 4 years now. Spent majority of his career injured. Had a pretty decent season last year, banged up for a lot of that season as well, but fought through it. This year had a pretty decent season as well. Ultimately, tore a ligament in his thumb, had to shut it down for the season a couple games ago, could not deal with the pain, needed to shut it down and get surgery, so that's what he did. And reportedly this week, he has made it known that he is going to be entering his name into the transfer portal. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I said this on Twitter. I was like, this felt like the writing was kind of on the wall. Yeah. It sucks. I think for Clemson, for the wide receiver room, I think Troy has been, when healthy, he's been one of your more consistent guys. He had an interview with the Clemson Insider. It's a good read. He was very honest, kind of with why he decided to enter the portal. He felt like he wasn't growing as a player. A lot of that it was injuries, and of course the introduction of 2 5-star freshman wide receivers, and the decrease in snaps over the course of the season that he got. I think all of that, coupled, and I think it influenced his decision. I think it makes a lot of sense for him. This is his 4th season. He's set to graduate. It's disappointing for Clemson because he has been such a dependable guy in the rotation when he's been healthy. Really, really great hands, a plus in the blocking game. I think he's going to be a really good player for somebody. If he can, stay healthy, I think, and then that's the biggest thing with him. And I think his career could have turned out so differently if he wasn't injured so much to start his career, because he could have developed into one of the premier guys in the wide receiver room, and he wasn't going to have to fight for his spot with guys that are younger than him. It sucks. But it was one of the defections I'm not surprised about at all, and it felt like it was trending that direction because something had to give, because I didn't think he was just going to stay there and just be a spot rotation player as Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore and even when Tyler Brown comes back, and of course you still have Antonio Williams, like those guys are developing and getting more and more play and featured in the offense. It just felt like he was kind of the odd one out because he was older. So sucks, for Clemson, because I do think that is a loss. And I think you're losing a really, really good football player. But that's kind of the reality of how this, the development of this wide receiver room has turned out. And so, best of luck to Troy. I really, really, I'm going to be following his career, wherever he goes and rooting for him, because he definitely was one of my favorite guys in the room. So I think he's going to be a really good player for somebody.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Wish Troy Stellato all the best. I think he gave Clemson all he could give. Unfortunately, he just had a career that was plagued with injuries, and that's not his fault. It's just kind of the unfortunate nature of how things broke for him at Clemson. And you mentioned the young guys that are emerging, and TJ Moore and Brian Wesco. Those guys are going to eat up a ton of snaps. They already are. They're going to continue to garner more snaps because of their development. You mentioned you got Antonio Williams, a Tyler Brown that should be back hopefully this week. There's a lot of guys in that room, a lot of talented receivers. And, I really can't blame Troy for, taking a look around and being like, maybe I need a fresh start somewhere else. There's a very congested wide receiver room. He's been plagued with injuries, and sometimes a change of scenery can kind of re-energize you and put you in a different headspace and kind of get you going. So I really do wish the best for Troy Stellato. I hope he goes on to have a very successful rest of his college career. And ultimately, I hope he fulfills his dreams and makes it to the league. I garner no hard feelings to him. I completely understand this decision, and I think most Clemson fans who pay attention to the program, like you, Jordan, saw this coming from a mile away.
Yeah, it just you knew something had to give there. Somebody and Troy, he was a class of 2021 guy. One of the only I think he's the only receiver from that 2021 class that's still here. Yeah, he definitely is. So that's, I mean, it says a lot of about kind of where you were that season. But I think he had the potential to be more than what he was, but just never could really get there because of injuries. But I think he's a really nice football player.
Yeah.
And I didn't even mention, you still got Cole Turner. Cole Turner's essentially a freshman when you think about it in terms of eligibility, because he redshirted in 2022, and then they got his 2023 back because of injuries. So I mean, when you think about all the guys that are still in the room, and of course you still have Noble Johnson and Tink Kelly hanging around. So there wasn't a whole he's just kind of in he's the odd man out, like I said. So it sucks, but it felt like that was kind of the direction this was headed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all makes sense. And again, wish him the best. Hope he has a great rest of his college career and ultimately makes it to the NFL. Unfortunately, he won't be Clemson's last transfer portal player that decides to move on from the Tigers. This is just the beginning of it. Again, as the portal opens, I think next week, you'll see probably quite a few guys move on. He probably won't be the only one from the wide receiver group that'll move on. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there, and we'll report on the names as they come. I don't want to do a whole lot of speculation on who's going to leave, who's not going to leave. We'll just react to the news as it comes. Unfortunately, the time has come, Jordan, for us to talk about this South Carolina game that happened this past Saturday. Time to put this game behind us. But before we do, let's take a look back on what happened this past Saturday, the shortcomings of the Clemson Tigers, where the game went wrong, where the Clemson Tigers lost the game. We've had a couple days to calm down from some of the emotions that we felt immediately following that game on Saturday. If you guys missed our post-game live, I encourage you to go check it out. Me and Jordan were pretty brutally honest, I felt like, in that post-game live. Gave our raw, unfiltered reactions immediately following a pretty gut-wrenching loss to rival South Carolina. So, Jordan, I don't know. I'm sure you've gone back and watched at least parts of the game. I don't know if you could stomach to watch the entire game, but I've gone back and watched parts of the game, and time to give our final thoughts on it. For me, it really came down to critical mistakes for the Tigers. Obviously, the most glaring was the Cade Klubnik turnover on the final drive when we're in South Carolina territory with, at a minimum, the ability to tie the game up, hopefully win the game in regulation, which is what Clemson was trying to do. Ultimately, it ended badly. But before that, wasted opportunities. Clemson had so many opportunities, particularly in the second half of the game, to kind of put distance between them and South Carolina. The defense came up with a couple turnovers, and I think Clemson had 3 turnovers overall in the game, 2 in the second half, and came away with 0 points off of any of those turnovers. Yep. Wasted opportunities. 3 and outs in the second half. Conservative play calling. Poor tackling. All of that resulted in the result that you got on Saturday. A lot of people have been pointing out that why the heck did your leading tackler, Sammy Brown, basically not play the fourth quarter? I don't know. Dabo was asked about it on his radio show on Sunday. He was asked about it in his press conference this week. Didn't really have a good answer for it. Just kind of that was the coach's decision. Doesn't necessarily mean it was the right decision, but that was the decision that was made, was essentially his response to it. But at the end of the day, it was an unacceptable loss. Now that you've had a couple days to kind of digest everything that happened, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think you hit on it. I think it was just missed opportunities were the name of that game. I mean, for once, I felt like Clemson actually had a really good plan on both sides of the ball. Honestly, I thought offensively, especially early on, I think they had South Carolina scouted really well, and that's something that at times this season I didn't feel like was they did very well. Like it felt like it took Clemson a while to really settle into a game and get comfortable and see what the opponent was doing. I thought on Saturday both both sides of the ball came to play and they had a good plan. Offensively, you were really good at getting the ball out quick out of Cade's hands. You didn't have much of a run game for a lot of it, but you did do a great job of getting the football out of Cade's hands with a lot of quick game. The receivers were stepping up, they were making plays, and when they would cheat their safeties down, play a little bit more man, man free, like you took a shot, and your 5-star receivers and Antonio Williams, they came down with it. They were and ultimately what caused drives to stall were those missed opportunities, those mistakes. Cade was not accurate on some of those money throws that you needed to make on key third down conversions. Of course, some of the questionable personnel usages of Phil Maffa in this game were really frustrating. You had a guy that was clearly laboring, and you were forcing the ball to him in situations where he didn't have the ability to get that tough yardage that he had shown to be able to earlier in the year, because he's just not healthy. That fourth down early in the game, that 4th and 1, you brought out the jumbo package, heavy package, and got stuff. Like, it was Phil. It just wasn't good, and all of that was because you threw a toss sweep to Phil Maffa on the 3rd down before that to the edge, where he's clearly not going to beat somebody to that. That's not his game normally to begin with. They're just really frustrating personnel decisions on both sides of the ball, and key mistakes. Defensively, you bottled up South Carolina's passing game. Their receivers weren't doing much of anything. If Sellers was not extending a play to make a throw, I thought their traditional drop back passing game there wasn't really much there. And, you were getting to Lenore Sellers. I think that was the thing we felt like Clemson would be able to do, and they did really well. But, they over pursued at times. They got out of their rush lanes. Like, that's something that was really apparent on the rewatch. It was apparent on the first time viewing too, but when you watch it again and you watch a play over and over, you realize how bad you over pursued at times, because and South Carolina was perfectly fine with letting you work your way all the way into the backfield if you were going to over pursue and Sellers was going to take off.
Yeah.
And that was the frustrating thing. It felt like you lost to like one player. I think that was the most difficult thing, because I felt like in the other matchups that your corners against their receivers, Josh Simon, who we weren't sure was going to play, he didn't have much of an impact on this game. Yeah. Your defensive line against their offensive line, you were winning those matchups, but Lenore Sellers being the freak that he is, and doing some things that some poor fundamentals caused you to give up big chunk plays in the run game and just off scrambles. And that was that was the frustrating thing. And because offensively you kept South Carolina in striking distance, because you didn't capitalize on those turnovers and you didn't hit those key money throws. That's what you were begging for. That you were begging to lose the way that you did.
Right.
And that was and that was the frustrating thing. I feel like if you played that game again, there are probably a lot of things you could have done differently. You hit on a couple of those plays. I mean, the margins were that small, and you had too many. You had too many missed opportunities there, and so you deserve to lose that game because of it. But it is frustrating. But Lenore Sellers is a freak, man. There's not many quarterbacks that would have done what he did. And I think,
unfortunately, he probably had one of his best games of the season, if not his best game, at least with his feet,
yeah,
against the Clemson Tigers. And
some special plays, man. Like something you're just like, what do you do?
I think he broke the record for broken tackles on the season with like 18 broken tackles.
Forced 18 missed tackles according to PFF.
Absolutely ridiculous. Like, what a ridiculous number to think about. One guy broke 18 tackles in a game, and not to mention it was the quarterback that did it. So, just poor fundamental tackling at times for Clemson. Other times it was, you got to give Lenore Sellers credit. He's an athlete. He went out there and made plays.
He made you wrong even when you were right, and that's what
made you wrong even when you were right. But that does not absolve this defense of piss poor tackling, arm tackling, and bad angles, poor effort at times. There was certainly some of that as well, mixed in with the super athletic, heroic plays of Lenore Sellers. So I don't want to pretend like I'm not giving him any credit, but I'm really just focused on Clemson's defense and just their inability. And going to the nickel set that they did in the fourth quarter just makes zero sense. South Carolina couldn't throw the ball at all. And suddenly we move to a nickel set in the fourth quarter and pretend like suddenly they're going to start throwing the ball in the fourth quarter when they haven't been able to throw the ball all game. You take your leading tackler, who still ended the game as your leading tackler, off the field. I think he played a total of 4 snaps in the fourth quarter, but still was your leading tackler and essentially didn't play an entire quarter of the game.
Yep.
The most important quarter of the game, actually, where you ultimately lost the game. So tons of missed opportunities. We can beat a dead horse, but this game's been talked about probably more than any other game this season. It's unfortunate. It's unacceptable. It was a gut-wrenching loss, and I'm just ready to turn the page from it because when I start talking about this game again, all my emotions come back, and I get irritated all over again. Yeah. I'm glad we're in the ACC championship game. I'm glad our season's not over. I'm glad we have something to look forward to, and it certainly makes it easier. But when you start talking about this game, man, I just get frustrated all over again.
Yeah,
because it didn't have to end that way. It didn't have to be this way, but it is. So
yeah,
it's frustrating.
I'm with you, man. I hate losing to them, but it's one of those things. And
here we are, 2 out of 3 years. Both in the Valley. It's unacceptable, man. You can't lose to South Carolina 2 out of 3 years, especially both of those coming at home.
Yeah.
You lose your second home game of the season. When's the last time Clemson's lost 2 home games in a season? I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that.
No, it wouldn't have been 20. Did we lose 2 in? Okay, no, because we lost our losses in 2014 were Georgia. That was at Georgia. We lost at Florida State. Mm-hmm. I believe that was and then
2014 was
at Georgia. Yeah, we didn't even lose a home game.
Yeah.
2013. Yeah, it
you have to go back.
Yeah, you have to go back to the last time we won we lost 2 home games.
Maybe 2012, somewhere in there. Yeah. I don't know. Somebody will look it up later and put it in the comments, but it just shows, kind of some of the unfortunate things that have happened this year. But